Hey everyone, Ryan Young, KAATARO Jiu-Jitsu. I hope you're doing well. So I thought I'd do a little different video for you guys today. Normally we get the cameras all set up. I have Rusty over and all that, but I figured we'd do a little different format today. Get it out a little easier and a little quicker. So what I wanted to cover today has to do with your mindset. And your mindset in, not only in your training, but in your becoming successful in jiu-jitsu. Me being a 51-year-old, I've lived a little bit, not only in jiu-jitsu and in life. What this has to do with is overcoming your fears. And one of the things that we need to know as human beings, if we don't know it already, and you know, if you didn't already think of it, as soon as I mention it, you'll say, yeah, actually that is kind of true. This has to do with overcoming your fears. Now, a normal human being will look at a fear and will turn around and walk away because they're in fear and they're afraid of it. So our normal instinct is to run away from it. Conversely, if we see something that we like, our first instinct and our inclination, even if everything tells us not to, is to run toward that pleasure. So we run away from fear and we run to pleasure. Fear is not something that necessarily needs to be overcome per se. Fear needs to be dealt with. Sometimes you need to deal with it in a way that enables you to address it and continue despite it. And other times that fear is warranted and you just need to do what your body is telling you and get away from it. In jiu-jitsu, what are you trying to do in jiu-jitsu? If you're trying to simply be a competitor, that's one thing. But if you're trying to do jiu-jitsu as a self-defense, then that's a completely different thing. With jiu-jitsu in a sport, if you're just looking to compete here and there, you don't necessarily need to overcome many fears. Now, you're gonna have to overcome some fears, but because you can simply tap, you don't need to really deal with too many fears. For instance, if you're afraid of getting choked, as soon as somebody sinks a choke in, you're gonna tap right away, right? Because you fear getting choked out. So anytime somebody puts me in a choke, I'm just gonna tap. Or I fear getting my arm destroyed in an arm bar, or my shoulder destroyed, or my heel, or my leg destroyed through a heel hook or whatever. So as soon as it comes on, I'm just gonna tap and end it, because that's what you can do in jiu-jitsu. The best thing about jiu-jitsu, especially in a competitive mindset, competitive environment, is that it's not super dangerous. It can be, but just no more dangerous than any other sport, because there's always a point at which you can say stop and let's do this over, right? You get the old do-over all the time. With regard to your training and your training for competition, and even more so with competition, sometimes you don't even need to address your fears, because you may be coming up against a competitor whose sole strategy, you know, maybe he wrestled and he wrestled in high school and that's his thing, right? His whole thing is to shoot in, do a double leg, take you down, get the cross side, you know, get the 2 points for the takedown and hold you there and pin you there. Then what fear is there in it for you? The only thing you're really looking at is, oh, this guy might take me down, so I don't want to be taken down, right? There's no fear in that, right? Not any deep set fear. Maybe you have a fear of getting taken down, but really after you get taken down 40, 50, 150 times, you won't fear it anymore. You'll just go, oh, you know, how do I stop it? And that's it. So in a tournament, there isn't that much on the line. You know, sure, there is a win or a lose, a win or a loss, or a medal that's on the line. But that's really it, right? Because you can always stop. You can always cry uncle. You can always say mercy. That's why there's a different mindset with people who do sport jiu-jitsu and people who do jiu-jitsu for self-defense. What's the difference? With regard to the mindset and the self-defense side, it's a little bit different. Actually, it's a lot different. And I'll tell you why. Because if you're really, truly training jiu-jitsu for self-defense, then you need to overcome fears. You need to look at fears and you need to evaluate them. Is this a fear that's a rational fear, or is this a fear that's a fear that I just should learn to deal with and beat? So I'll give you an example. Life and death situation. You know, a lot of people, when you're in a situation where there's gunfire, right? Or when there's a gun present, what do people do? People will often cower and they'll cover their heads. They'll crouch down. They'll make themselves as small as possible in the hopes that the person with the firearm won't shoot them. You think to yourself, please don't shoot me, please, I've got a family, don't hurt me. You know, you think in those terms, and then you become the person who's now begging for your life. When you think about it and you're not in that situation, what would be the logical thing to do? Okay, so I'll tell you what the logical mindset should be if you're not already thinking it. It's, okay, I'm in this room, there's a guy with a gun, and he's shooting people. He's gonna shoot everybody here. Or at least that I have to assume that's his intent. So today is gonna be the day that I die. So if today is the day that I die, then I'm gonna die fighting. I'm not gonna die on my knees, I'm gonna die fighting. So that's where you just think of yourself, you wait till he's not looking, and you just make a run for it. And you just either run out or you run to. One of the two, but you're not gonna stay there. You may look at it and go, okay, there's a door right there. I can get out before he can possibly shoot at the door. I know where the hall is. I know that it curves. I know that it turns. I can get out of the way before he can get out the door and shoot me. That's one. Or you can go, that door is so far away, I'm not gonna get to the door before he can shoot me. And also, even if I were to be able to get to the door, once I get out the door, the hallway is so long that by the time he gets out the door to follow me, he can just shoot right down the hallway and take me out. So what I need to do is I need to figure out a way to get to him, to get to that gun, right? And that's where you start thinking, okay, you know, how do I get him to look somewhere else while I go? Well, you know, what do I have in my pocket? You know, I've got keys, I've got a wallet. You know, here, let me just grab this wallet and let me throw the wallet in the direction I want him to look, so that when he looks, I can catch him from the blind side. That would be overcoming your fear of getting killed that day by realizing and rationalizing, hell, I'm gonna die. I might as well die fighting, right? And that's where you overcome your fear, you devise your plan, and then you put that plan into action. Now, let's take it down a notch. Right now, we're not assuming that we're gonna get shot. We're assuming we're gonna get stabbed, right? You're in a place you shouldn't be. There's a guy, whatever, drunk, who knows, thinks you're somebody who hassled him in the past, decides he wants to get his revenge out on that guy, and just so happens to look like you, pulls a knife out, and you have nowhere to go. Your back's up against the wall. Same thing. You're gonna look at it with the weapon, the gun, although it's harder to kill somebody with a knife than with a firearm. You're gonna look at it as, okay, you know, I don't wanna die here. But the more realistic thing is, if a guy knows how to fight with a knife, he's not gonna try to stab you. He's gonna cut you, right? And then your thinking has to be, okay, he's got a knife, I don't have a knife. I'm not getting out of here, you know, either without getting bled to death, or, you know, maybe I can get the knife from him, or maybe I can make it really hard on him. That's where you just decide, okay, it's gonna go on. You know, let me find a way to get two hands on that arm, on that hand, and control that knife, knowing that I'm gonna get cut. You assume you're gonna get cut, so you have to instantly overcome that fear of getting cut. Forget about getting stabbed. You have to overcome that fear of getting cut, because you're gonna get cut, right? Now let's take it down further. Getting punched. So when we train, especially during the summer, we're training in such a manner to deal with the potential of getting hit. One of the things that happens is that if you always train jiu-jitsu without strikes in it, you will forget about the fact that you can be struck at any time. You will, trust me. Anybody who says that I'm a black belt world champion, if I need to, I can use this in a fight. Yes, you can, but you're not dealing with an externality that somebody who doesn't know jiu-jitsu is fully aware of, and that is striking you, kicking you, stomping you. Somebody who doesn't know jiu-jitsu won't necessarily abide by any rules in a fight, whereas your, quote, fighting, unquote, meaning you're sparring, you're rolling, is done under a lot of rules. Rules where I'm not gonna hit my partner, rules where I'm not gonna do any kind of dick move, dirty move, whatever you wanna call it, because we're just training, we're just trying to have fun. Now, if you're just training and you're just trying to have fun, how does that possibly relate to a fight? Now, granted, you are gonna be in good shape. Granted, if it ends up in a grappling match on the ground, you will do fine. But if it's a fight, then it's something different. It's not necessarily going to be drawn out 5 minutes even, 10 minutes even. It may be over in 30 seconds. And that's not something that you train for. One thing that, people may look at is, and I have to think of as an instructor, is that a lot of my students are professionals. And yes, they do come to us because they want to learn the self-defense version of Jiu-Jitsu. But we cannot just be going balls to the wall every single day in class, because people have to go to work tomorrow, and they're not living in a gangland here. They're not living with the thought that they could die tomorrow in an assault, in an attack. They're thinking they're just going to do their lives and go through it like they do every single day. But in the off event that I do get attacked, I want to be able to defend myself to a certain degree. To what level you can defend yourself depends all on your training. For instance, we've got military in our studio. Some of them are, and police as well, and some of them are highly trained. The majority of them are trained, but not highly trained. But you do have those few that are highly trained. What is highly trained? You shoot thousands, tens of thousands of rounds per year out of a pistol and out of a rifle. You go through simulations where you're in a building and you're having to take people out, right? That is being highly trained in the firearms, and you deal with that pressure, that adrenaline. People think about the value of competition. Competition is valuable because it gets your adrenaline pumping. Well, sometimes, not all the time, right? I mean, after you get over the jitters of being there and having a ref go, But if like I'd mentioned earlier, if the matches are, everybody's winning by points and they're not going for the kill, so to speak, then what fear is there, right? There's no fear that triggers the adrenaline, right? On the other hand, in class, if you regularly switch it up on yourself or on, in my case, on their students, where in fact there was just one on Saturday, just playing around with one of my students, and I know I can do this with him. It was where I probably struck him 40, 50 times in the course of about 2 minutes. It made him realize, I'm not punching him, but I was slapping him, open hand strikes. But it made him realize that he needs to really stick to the discipline, right? Everybody talks about that old cliche, position over submission. And yes, that is true. But when you're in a fight and somebody is hitting you, what you tend to do is you tend to try to do as we talked about in the gun situation, where guns pointed at you, your first instinct is going to want to curl up into a ball, cover your eyes, cover your head, as if that's going to protect you. It's not. Most people, when you're hitting them on the mat in a grappling match, I'm mounted and I'm hitting you, your first instinct is to cover your face, not put your elbows low so you can keep me on your hips, so you can move me with your hips. Your instinct is to bring your arms up to cover your face, in which case I go to a high mount and now I'm even more effective. In a situation like this, you have to think to yourself, I'm gonna get hit. I have to accept the fact that I'm gonna get hit. My goal is to get hit fewer times, rather than trying to think I can block my face and possibly think I can stop a guy from hitting me. Because if he has the position, if he's high mounted on me and he's throwing punches, he can hit me any countless number of times. He can hit me till his arms get tired, because I'm not changing the position to get him out. What I need to do is I need to find a way to overcome that fear by covering, which I do by covering my eyes up and my face, and instead target his hip. Because if I target his hip, I will shift his position. I will have a better chance of putting him off balance so I can shift my hips out so I can escape the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 50th punch. That's just with the striking, but there are other things that happen as well. So here's another example. Now let's take it down a little bit. Let's say you're afraid of a particular member because he's got a wicked choke. You have a fear of getting choked. So what the normal reaction would be, right? Think about all the other examples. The normal reaction would be to run away from it, to avoid it. If you're doing jiu-jitsu for self-defense and you're looking to make yourself a better person in that way, you need to find a way to overcome that and train with that person and find a way to realize, okay, he's gonna go for my neck. How do I make it better for me so that when he goes for my neck, I have a better chance of getting out? That's a question you need to ask yourself. Because if you keep going away from it, you will never, ever be able to deal with it. Now, you may just say to yourself, you know what, this is just jiu-jitsu. I'm just here for fun. And I don't want to get hurt. So, I'm just not going to train with that particular person. If you look at it that way, that's fine. Don't train with that person. But realize that that particular kink in your game will never be unkinked. You will always have that kink in your game. You're always going to have, if it's not him, it'll be somebody else, right? So if your thinking is, I don't like to do closing the distance drills because there's the off chance that I'm going to get punched in the face. Well, yeah, right? There is. But if you go out to dinner late at night, you go to a nice restaurant. It's a restaurant in a gentrifying part of town, meaning it's a shitty part of town, but the town is undergoing a revitalization, right? And one of the ways they'll do that is they'll put a trendy restaurant. And I always wanted to go to that restaurant, and I'll go. And I was just thinking about that. There was this restaurant that I went to when I was visiting, when we were on our road trip in a big city, right? A big city that doesn't have the greatest reputation for safety, but there was an area that was being revitalized, and they had a lot of good trendy restaurants there. In fact, one of the best barbecues I ever had was there, not in Texas. Unbelievable as that may sound. But the thing is, just at the end of the block, they hadn't gotten to that part of the street yet. So there were a bunch of people just kind of hanging out, and it looked pretty sketchy, graffiti and, buildings that were vacant and, people looking at you funny, knowing that you don't belong here. And, so let's say you go and grab dinner and because of the way your schedule was that day, you went and had a 9 o'clock dinner and they close at 10. Well, here you are at 10 p.m. Everything's died down. There aren't that many people left. You walk out to your car, which is on the street, and there's somebody that you have to deal with. Because you didn't do those closing the distance drills, you have no idea how to do it. But you can put a wicked heel hook on somebody, right? But the guy's standing, and you have to get him to the ground, and he happens to be very good at punching. But since you never did those distance closing drills because you were afraid of getting struck in the face, guess what? You don't know how to close a distance, which is the most important thing in this particular situation. You're now lacking, even though you've been training. You've been training in jiu-jitsu, yet you don't have a core skill because you're afraid of it. So what needs to happen is this. You need to learn that fear is always going to be there, but that you have to be able to overcome it. I once read an article. This was probably 20 plus years ago. It was an article of Rickson Gracie getting interviewed. And the interviewer asks him, because at that time, Royce had talked about how, I'm not even the best in my family. I'm not even the best of my brothers. My brother Rickson just plays with me, right? He had said that. So, that's when Rickson got known pretty quick, because Royce was famous, and he was, being touted as the toughest man alive. And he's saying, no, not even that. It's my brother. That in that interview with Rickson, they had asked him, are you fearless? And he said, of course not. He says, I display, or our fear comes up for me pretty regularly. And they said, well, how can you be the toughest guy in the world and show fear or have fear? He said, look, fear is a healthy thing. What you need to do is you need to observe that fear and you need to evaluate and say, is this fear warranted? And if it is warranted, get out of the situation. However, right, and I think at that time he only had one child. It might have only been Hoxton. I don't know. But, however, he said, if my son is maybe 20 feet away from me and there's a lion in between, at the 10-foot mark, between my son and him, I'm definitely afraid of a lion, but my son is on the other side of that lion. What am I going to do? Am I going to succumb to that fear of the lion and let my son perish? Of course not. I will overcome that fear to deal with the lion to rescue my son, right? That is what we call courage. Now, courage is what you do, if you work to overcome a fear that is facing you. Courage is having a fear of snakes and having a snake right in front of you, a rattlesnake that you need to get past in order to survive or to protect someone else. Right? Somebody says, oh man, that guy was courageous. What did he do? Well, there was a person who had opened fire on everybody and, he had gotten shot. But despite that, he continued to fight on to neutralize that guy and save 50 other people. That person is courageous. The people who cowered were not courageous. In Jiu-Jitsu and in any other sport, you have to look at your fear and you have to ask yourself, is this a fear that is worth overcoming? And if it is worth overcoming, you have to suck it up and you have to overcome this fear. You cannot be afraid of it. There's fear and there's being afraid. I have a fear of getting hurt, but am I afraid to go to the studio every day? Absolutely not, despite the fact that I may get hurt. For yourself, look at this as a way to personally evaluate things and say, what am I afraid of in life? Not only jiu-jitsu, in life. What am I afraid of? Find a way, devise a plan to overcome it. Now, don't just go without a plan. Have a plan. Otherwise, that fear will prove to be warranted, right? And everything that you're afraid of. There are a lot of things that you do and somebody goes, I don't know how you can do that. I'm afraid of that. And you're not afraid at all. Why are you not afraid? Because it may have been something that you were afraid of, but you devised a plan and you overcame it because you had leverage on yourself. You had to figure out a way to overcome that fear. You had to develop that courage. You had to dig deep and you had to beat it. And once you beat it, then you realized, okay, I know how to beat this fear. It's not really warranted for me to be afraid of this anymore. So you're no longer afraid of it. But that other person did not get to that point that you did where they had to overcome that fear. Look at your fears. When your fear confronts you, you have to ask yourself, is this a fear worth it? Worth overcoming? And then you need to go and overcome it. If you don't know how to do it, ask someone. If you ask someone who is not afraid of it and who overcomes it, they will tell you how to do it. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. The reason why society progresses is because we stand on the shoulders of people before us that were able to figure out what needs to be done, and we can benefit from that knowledge. And that's what jiu-jitsu is. You're trying to find a way to conquer some of your fears. For some of you just want to do it. I just want to fight. Okay. But for others, you're doing it. What are the motivations for people doing jiu-jitsu? They're doing it to get in shape. They're doing it to compete in something, in a sport, or they're doing it to be able to protect themselves. I'll use my daughter as an example. My daughter wanted to quit. My daughter's 14. She wanted to quit when she was 10 or 12. And I told her, no, you can't. The greatest fear that a father has for their daughter is that something will happen to their daughter that is out of their control, right? Guys don't really have the same types of worries that women do. Guys don't walk around necessarily scanning left and right at all times, knowing what's around them, so to speak, because somebody might attack them. Women do. So with my daughter, I want to give her the gift of jiu-jitsu. So whether she wants it or not, she is getting it. So I told her, no, you can't quit, because you're like any normal girl. You're going to want to go on a date at some point, and I need to give you as many tools as possible so that if an event happens where this boy, man, whatever, wants to do something to you that you don't want to happen, you will have some tools to make it really hard for him to accomplish it. And I cannot guarantee you will succeed. I cannot guarantee you will come up on top, because I don't know what you're coming up against. But what I can guarantee is that that person, that criminal, is going to wish he had not messed with you in the first place. I told her that if I ever get that call from the police telling me my daughter was involved in an assault and she is in the hospital, my expectation is that that person who you were with, who assaulted you, is in the hospital room next door, just as messed up as you are, if not worse. I am overcoming my fear for harm coming to my daughter by doing the best that I can in teaching her self-defense. At the same time, I've also gone through and introduced to her, and I take her to the range as many times as I can to how to work a firearm. She's a pretty good shot. Anyway, so that aside, use jiu-jitsu to help you overcome your fears. But where possible, try not to cower from a fear that comes up from everyday training in your jiu-jitsu class. If you fear something, find the solution, ask somebody for a solution, and then go and confront it. Develop courage. It can only benefit you. Anyway, that's all I got for you. Thank you for your time. Happy training. Bye-bye now.